This is a video on tarot card trimming. I have some PMs about how do you do it, properly without destroying the card or whatever. So I'm going to quickly show you guys. It's an easy process, so it's going to be a short video. We're going to get the Golden Tarot, and here's the box that it came in with a very thick manual. And we're going to get the Golden Tarot, and we're going to trim off the borders. Now, they are very attractive and very pretty, I admit. They do shine with the light. Unfortunately, they cut into my hands when I'm shuffling. I don't mean like poke into my hands. I mean like ninja star freaking razor blade cut into my fucking hand. So we're going to cut these up and trim the borders off. Now, there's several ways you can do this. One would be to just trim the edges around here and trim off the title. But I'm not going to trim off the title because I'm not familiar enough with this tarot deck to know what all the cards are. Maybe I'll go back and later and trim the titles off, but for now, I don't think the titles are that intrusive. It's a very small title at the bottom. And also the good thing about it is the border, I don't think it's going to show much of a difference, once it's trimmed versus when it was not trimmed. So this is going to be okay. We're going to leave the title on. So we're just going to cut the border off with the golden stuff that's very sharp. So I'm just using regular scissors from Kmart, Walmart, whatever, and a corner trimmer. I got this from my local hobby shop for, I think it was $6. It was pretty cheap. The reservoir down here at the bottom holds the trimmings, and it'll only hold like about 20 or 30 before you have to kind of dump it out, and you just open the bottom here. And once you open the bottom, it'll dump all the trimmings out. And it does leak, so some of the trimmings will fall on your lap while you're cutting, but no big deal. It was $6, who cares? So I'm just going to do one for you guys, and then you can get the idea, and I'll do the rest off camera. So I'm just going to do the left side first. And I'll leave this intact so it doesn't make a big mess. I have a nice intact piece instead of 4 small pieces wandering around. Now these do have good borders on them, defined borders, which is a good deal. Some other tarot decks aren't that way. Some other tarot decks have very obscure borders where in other words, one card will not be the same size as the other card, so they're not good to trim, but this one is. The borders are the same for all the cards. Some cards have borders that are not the same. These do, so this is good. All right, so then we'll get our corner trimmer, and we're just going to insert the corners into the corner trimmer. So there we have it, a nicely trimmed 8 of Cups. Let's turn on the close-up. Nicely trimmed 8 of Cups, very nice at the bottom, rounded corners. So an obvious question is going to be, when you trim all of these, how do you know that they're all going to be the same size? Well, they're kind of all the same size, but not exactly. If you want them exactly the same size, you're going to have to get some light sandpaper, grab the whole deck, and just run it across the sandpaper on the table until, they're all the same, exactly the same size and everything, and smooth. If you want it that way. Some cards I just don't want that way. Like when I trimmed my Druidcraft deck, it's not exactly the same, but we're talking like, 1/4 of a millimeter or something like that. I really don't care. It doesn't affect my shuffling. It doesn't affect me dealing out the cards or reading the cards or anything like that. So, and you also need to consider before you trim, how much you're going to trim off. For example, the Llewellyn deck, when you trim it, it becomes a miniature deck. Like 90% of the card, I think, is borders. So if you're not prepared to turn your cards into a miniature deck, then do not, trim them. So let's do an example of a deck that cannot be trimmed very well just because of a variance in all the cards. This is the Lover's Path Tarot. This is what it looks like on the box. And you'll notice the 8 of Arrows is totally different than power as far as being trimmed. So obviously you could trim this part off in the bottom, and you could trim this part off in the top, so the white around it is the same. However, the rest of it is not. So if you wanted to trim the entire border off, this border comes up a little higher than that border. So if you wanted to take off all the borders, you're not going to be able to do it, because the cards would then be different sizes. This one would be larger than this one, obviously, because of the border difference. So just keep that in mind before you trim. Again, Lover's Path is not a good deck to trim. Something like this with all the borders the same, the Four Swords is a good deck to trim. Any deck that's going to be too large for you, like the Druidcraft was for me, is going to be a great deck to trim. It still looks good on the back. It didn't affect the corners any. The corners are still fine. The colors are vibrant and just jump out at you without the borders. All the distractions are gone from the card. It's a pure card. Exactly the same as this one and that one. Obviously I like the borderless better. It just looks a lot better to me, and that's just my opinion. But again, if you're going to take the titles off, know what the hell the cards are, because if you don't know what the card is, like for example, this doesn't look like the Fool to me. The Fool is, you know, the guy jumping off or whatever, and this is not the Fool to me. So there's a bunch of cards I just don't know what they are. And that's okay, you know, because I'm going to leave the title at the bottom. So anyway, that's my video on card trimming. Just get yourself a pair of crappy scissors from Walmart. You know, a little better quality would be good. And a $6 corner trimmer from your hobby store.